The Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, OnScreen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Roerig. Hello, everybody, and welcome to OnScreen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to be talking a little bit more about Zelda. We're going to be talking about some stuff coming up on the horizon. I'm going to be talking about a show on Netflix that I started watching that just is doing something a little interesting. And we are going to be talking about, in full spoilers, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So let's get started with our On the Horizon segments.
On the horizon.
This week on the horizon, The Rising is coming on Monday, May 29th on the CW. This is a British thriller about a murder victim returning to life to seek revenge. This is a British series and it's coming to the CW. This is kind of what networks like the CW have been doing in the last couple of years during summer when they don't have anything to air and they've realized reruns are no longer popular. So now they just like import European shows and stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So that's one of those examples. You're probably also going to see more of this with the strike as well. Once they start running out of scripted content, you're going to see a lot more imported stuff hitting just because it's available. Then on Thursday, June 1st, Diablo 4 is coming to PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. And Street Fighter 6 is coming the next day on Friday, June 2nd to PS4, PS5, Xbox Series X, and PC.
Pretty insane stretch we're going into here.
Yeah. A lot of games. And I don't think any of them hold a candle to the one that's already out. Then on Friday, June 2nd, The Boogeyman comes to movie theaters. This is a Stephen King adaptation. And Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse comes on Friday, June 2nd as well to theaters, continuing the Spider-Verse animated Spider-Man movie franchise.
Yes.
That is it for our On the Horizon segment. And now we're going to move on to On Tap.
What we've been watching. What we've been playing. What's on tap.
So, only going to talk about one thing pretty briefly. I started watching a show called Inside Man that's on Netflix. So this show comes from Stephen Moffat, who ran a stretch of Doctor Who. He also did the Sherlock TV series with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes.
And this is like a detective story, but it's kind of weird. So David Tennant is in this, who, Moffat had previously worked with on Doctor Who. He plays like a vicar, which is like British priest, I guess. And Stanley Tucci is in it, or as I like to call him, Stanley Touche. And he is like this detective, but he's American. He's in America in prison. He murdered his wife. And and he's fine being in prison. He's not going to get out. That's not he's on death row. And basically, like, it ties these two stories together. It's this vicar in England and this guy on death row who's like a detective in America. And it kind of sets up those two things. And you're like, okay, what's going on here? How do these things connect? How those connect isn't kind of as interesting, but what it is doing, what the show is doing that I think is very interesting is that it is setting up these impasses between characters. Like, it'll create a situation and it'll create this impasse where, like, these two characters fundamentally cannot budge from their positions when they're in opposition to each other. There's no compromise. They're just butting heads at a certain point. What makes this kind of interesting is, like, it's one of those concepts where you can think, like, okay, what would be a really interesting concept? And you come up with that concept and you figure out how the storytelling for that is going to go. And then after that, you're like, okay, how do we get a conflict to escalate to that point that we have that impasse in the very first place? And unfortunately, their answer was like, just make it happen.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah, there's like some character conflict that just makes absolutely no sense. And it's there because they're trying to create that impasse. So they have to create this impasse between these characters so you can get to this point where these characters are in complete opposition to each other and there's no room for compromise on either side. It's like life or death on both sides. Nothing nothing can budge. There's no way out about it. And you have to understand, like, when you're thinking of like absolutes like that, those kind of absolutes are kind of impossible, you know? It's a fun idea to explore, but it's kind of impossible to actually reach a real position like that.
Right, yeah.
And so they do that through kind of bullshit means of like getting through that.
Right.
What I think is interesting about that is I've had ideas like this before where I thought like, I had a dream one time where I had a friend of mine was in the dream, and in my dream he was like a serial killer, but he was like the nicest guy, even as a serial killer. It wasn't like he was pretending to be a nice guy. He was a nice guy as he was a serial killer, so nobody was upset with him that he was killing people. And like I woke up from the dream and I thought the idea was like fascinating, but I kept butting my head like, how can you get to that point that works? And I couldn't come up with anything. And so I said, okay, I give up. This is just an undoable story. I can't make this work. The only way it works is with dream logic. You know,
right.
It can't work in the real world. What this show is doing, what Stephen Moffat is doing with this show, is he ran into the same problem I did and then just said, well, I don't care.
Yeah. He
like,
said, okay, dream logic works. That's good.
He's like, it doesn't matter. He's all, it doesn't matter. Like, he's all, what? I don't care about that. I care about the impasse. So I want to tell the story of this impasse so I can just completely ignore everything that gets us there. It's garbage. It doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. I don't care because what I want to do is focus on this impasse.
Right.
That's what I think is interesting about this. So if anybody wants to check that out, it's called Inside Man. It's on Netflix. David Tennant, Stanley Touche, and Stephen Moffat, creating and writing and producing the whole thing. It's interesting what they're doing, but it's kind of bullshit how they're getting there. That's what I can say about Inside Man. So, yeah, I just think it's kind of interesting that somebody can do it. I was talking to my mom about it when we were watching. I said, this is a show that, like, if I was an accomplished showrunner or something and I was making a show and I wanted to make this show, I couldn't do it because I couldn't get past that logically. Like, I wouldn't be able to get past that. I would hit that and I'd say, okay, how do I make this work? And I would struggle and struggle and struggle and then give up and go, I can't make this work. And it would never occur to me to just go, oh, it doesn't matter if it works.
Right.
So I just think that's kind of interesting. But that is it for our On Tap segment. And now we're going to move on to Anecdotes of the Fandom. This is something we started last week. We're going to be talking a little bit about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I think we're going to be doing this for the foreseeable future as we're playing this absolutely massive game. We're going to be playing for quite a while, and we're going to check back in every so often and talk about some of our anecdotes in the game. You went to a brand new location that wasn't disclosed in the trailers for this game. So even though this isn't a full spoiler section, warning for spoilers here on Tears of the Kingdom about a section of the game that they don't really tell you about in the trailers, although you get to it fairly early in the game, or can. I haven't personally gone there. But tell us a little bit about the new area of Tears of the Kingdom that you just recently explored.
Yeah, so I took a trip down into the depths. One of the first things I did in the game, because like that's actually like one of the first quests you get. The quest marker like kind of leads you there. So there's a big hole in the middle of Hyrule. Actually, there's multiple holes in Hyrule. They're called chasms. And when you go down into a chasm, you go into depths. And what the depths is, it's a place completely infected with something called the gloom, which has to do with like Ganon, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And what the gloom is the gloom.
It's basically what destroyed the Master Sword at the beginning of the game, right?
Yes. Yeah, it infects all living things. And so what it does to you, like, as the player, like, if you're exposed to it too much, you not only lose health, you lose access to those hearts for a limited time. If you go back to the surface and heal, you get your hearts back. Like, the hearts don't go away. Like,
yeah,
like,
there's also some foods you can cook that heal the gloom damage as well.
But they're grayed out and they're not, like, easily healable.
Yeah. It's like I used to play a tabletop RPG called Vampire the Masquerade, and there's something called ag damage that was like more than regular damage. Like it took less ag damage to kill you, kind of. It's like the idea of a different damage structure, you know? It does something more than just damage.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like something you'd expect from a Dark Souls game, I'd guess, as somebody who doesn't play Dark Souls games.
Right, it's really hard because, like, there's gloom all over the place, and enemies down there are also completely covered in gloom, so if, like, they hit you with their attacks, that infects you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so like
get a lot of bomb arrows. Get a lot of bombs and arrows.
Oh yeah, and it's dark. And so you can't see what you're doing. Like you can light up your way with like a certain item attached to your arrow that creates
It's the
light.
seeds, right? Like the...
Yes.
Yeah, I have like hundreds of those.
I think they're like
haven't
called
used them.
bright bloom seeds. I'm not 100% on that off the top of my head.
I think I have like 600 of those. I haven't used them once because I haven't gone into the depths. I've done a lot of cave and well exploring, and they're in any place that's like dark like that. They're all over the place.
Right.
But I haven't gone into the depths yet. I've been reluctant to go down there. But you went down there and tell us about your experiences down there.
Yeah, so I went down there, I met a guy, he told me to find Robbie because like they're surveying the depths and they found like some mysterious statues down there that they want to catalog and investigate. And so he sends me to find Robbie. Well, Robbie was supposed to be waiting for me. Okay, so when I get there, like Robbie was supposed to wait for me and then lead me to the statue. But of course, when I get down there, the guy's like, oh, well, Robbie got so excited. He just like ran off and decided to do it. And he got lost, and I haven't seen him. I'm like, oh, great. So, like, that means I have to go find this idiot now.
So that kicks off the quest
course.
titled Find Robbie's Dumbass.
Yeah. and he points me in, like, the general direction of, like, where he went. And, like, there are, like, a couple journals to lead you. So I go run off in that direction, and it's dark, and I'm, like, throwing arrows with bright bloom seeds, trying to light my way. And, you know, I can't see anything. And so, of course, like, I immediately just veer off into obviously the wrong direction, get attacked by hordes of moblins infected with gloom, and this is still the beginning of the game, so I'm super weak and I die, like, really easily. Mm-hmm. So it leads me, like, just being lost and having to deal with total darkness and these enemies and not finding Robbie anywhere and getting frustrated. That's when I was talking to you about this. And eventually, I retraced my steps. I did find Robbie, and I took a picture of the statue that he wanted me to take a picture of, which, by the way, that unlocks the camera function in your Pure Pad. Like, it's not, you don't have the ability to take pictures before you do that.
Yeah,
so,
there's some quests that are requiring me to take pictures, and I'm like, I heard that you get that in the depths, and I'm like, okay, I guess I have to do the depths before I can do those quests.
Yes, yeah, you have to talk to Robbie in the depths. And so I did that, and then, like, Robbie's like, okay, yeah, go back and report back to, like, the guy you talked to when you get there. And so I look at my map marker, and he's not where he was. And the quest marker moved to a place that was not even, like, on the map. It was, like, or, like, discovered on the map. It was, like, an empty spot in the middle of the map. And I'm like, okay, well, like, it was surrounded by the rest of the map. And I was like, okay, like, I've been around there, but somehow I didn't go there. And why'd he move there? So anyway, I tried to get to that spot in the map. And it's surrounded by an impassable, like, mountain. That's completely impassable. And I spend way too long trying to figure out how to get over this mountain into, like, that area on the map. Dying multiple times, getting even more frustrated with the depths, until eventually it dawns on me to check the Hyrule Field map. And lo and behold, there's the quest marker on Hyrule Field, and back at, like, the main place. And I go back up there, and yeah, he's there. He went back to the surface. He wasn't behind some mountain that I was not supposed to be trying to figure a way around. I felt really silly about that, but, like, yeah, that was my event. That was my adventure in the depths. That's my anecdote for the week.
Yeah, this game there's just so much that it's easy to forget simple things. I was telling you before we start recording that there was a part where I got stuck and I ended up like fast traveling out of the place I got stuck because I couldn't think of another way to get out of there. And then after like a couple of days passed and it just suddenly occurred to me like I probably could have used a rise to get out of there. And what made that frustrating rather than fast traveling is that there wasn't a save spot anywhere near where I was that I had uncovered yet. So when I fast traveled away, I lost a lot of distance of where I was traveling towards because I got stuck under something. Like I clipped through something and got stuck. And I'm like, oh man, I gotta have to fast travel all the way back to this one spot to get out of this thing. Just did not think about a rise. Now I don't even know if a rise would work in that situation, but it was one of those things where it just completely lost. It was absent from my mind. I did a similar thing. I think I mentioned it last week where I fell into a cave and I had to I used Ultra Hand to lift a piece of wood up to the, or not cave, a well, and to lift it up to the well, and then dropped it back down and used recall and stood on top of the wood so it would lift me up so I could climb out of the well. And then maybe a day after that, I thought I probably could have just used recall, or not recall. I could have just used a rise to get out of that well. Because there were points with like low ceiling. And now I've done a ton of cave and well explorations, and you can almost always find a space to get out of there by using a rise. So I was like, I just felt so stupid. It's one of those things. It's just, but there's just so much stuff, and so much of the stuff is so, it goes against our internal logic of what you should be able to do in a game. Like,
yes,
a system like a rise is, like I mentioned it last week, it's kind of preposterous how that even works.
It's almost like cheating.
Yeah, exactly. So like, when you get to a point where it's like, oh, I fell in, how can I get out of here? You're thinking with your traditional gamer logic, and you're like, oh, I can't get out doing this. You just don't think about the fact that you have this ability that does something that's so broken and different than anything you've ever done before.
It takes getting used to.
Yeah, exactly. You just forget that it exists. I've recently been doing a lot of using a rise because I've found a lot of like certain exploration puzzles and stuff that are really fun when you're using a rise, that are pretty just like little tricky ways of doing things that are pretty fun. And there's cool things you can do with the map. I mentioned some of this last week where you can mark something on a map and then go into like some cave, find yourself below that exact position, and then use a rise to get into it. You know, it's like there's cool stuff like that I really enjoy in the game. I really like when you can use the map in interesting ways, where like annotating the map isn't just to help to remind you of something, but actually like a useful tool in the exploration, like puzzles, you know? I think that's really cool. So I've been digging that. What I've done since last week, though, is I've done a lot more shrines. I've done all of the towers now, so I have the main overworld and the sky maps are completely filled out. I did all of the towers, and I did the first dungeon, or I believe it's called a temple, that I don't want to really talk about too much because I don't want to spoil it, but it is structurally, it's very similar to the Divine Beast, the way it works. I mean, there's 5 things you have to activate, just kind of like the terminals you have to activate. But it's not terminals. It's like, it's better themed to feeling like some kind, the way a dungeon would feel in a Zelda game than the Divine Beasts were. Like, the Divine Beasts all kind of felt like the same, each one, but just slightly different. And the way this works, it feels like much better themed to the situation, themed to the type of dungeon it is or something, rather than just, they're all based on rotation and they're all based on unlocking these terminals. It's like, no, there might be 5 things you have to do, but the thing you have to do to unlock that thing isn't just walk up to it and hit A. There's actually like something you have to do that's relevant to the situation you're in the same way that if you're playing like an Ocarina of Time style Zelda game, you get the hook shot, and then all the puzzles you have to solve, you're using the hook shot. It's kind of like that. The ability that you're using in these dungeons is something that you need to clear that dungeon. So it's not a full dungeon in the way that like you would expect from the traditional 3D Zelda games. It still feels kind of like a Divine Beast, but it's like themed more like an original dungeon, is like the best way I can put it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's kind of what I've been doing in Tears of the Kingdom. But that's it for this week. We're going to have more anecdotes throughout the weeks as we play more of this absolutely massive game that I've already have 75 hours into. I found out. So
nice. Damn.
It's been out for less than 2 weeks, and I've played it like a full-time job basically. But yeah, that's it for our anecdotes of the fandom segment. And now we're going to move on to our final segment, full spoilers. This week on Full Spoilers, we are finally talking about the start of Phase 5 of the MCU. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. So I saw this a while ago, and I mentioned it. I think I talked briefly about my impressions of it.
Yeah, but what did
you think of this?
Refresh the audience. You know what? Like, I didn't think it was like as bad as like it's made out to be. I thought it was a fun movie.
I was worried this was gonna you're gonna hate this one. I thought it was okay. There's a lot of stuff I think doesn't work that well, you know, and
it's a lot of, you need to turn your brain off. You need to not question this. Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of fun moments.
Yeah. It's a lot of like, okay, don't question it. Just enjoy the movie. Like, if you do that, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
If you start like analyzing everything, then yeah, it's like, you're not gonna have a lot of fun with this.
The biggest crime I think this movie makes is that I think 30% of what makes the Ant-Man movies work is Michael Pena, and he's not in this movie!
He's nowhere to be found.
His character is like the best, one of the best things about the entire Ant-Man franchise, you know? He's not in this. It is funny though that one of his buddies, the guy that's like, I think he's like Eastern European that's in his thief crew, who's played by David Melchian, is in this, but not as that character.
As a completely different, like, alien character.
Yeah.
Like the Ooze guy. It was, like, super funny. I love that character.
I have holes!
Yes, I have holes! That ending. Even though, like, the Freedom Fighters were completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They completely wasted William Jackson Harper as
They
boss.
really did. He did not have a lot of screen time or, like, a lot to really do with the plot.
And did you notice that the leader of the revolution is that one Moff Gideon spy from The Mandalorian? From that one storyline we really didn't like?
Oh, yes, that's right. I knew I recognized her. I was like...
There's a lot of stuff just wasted in this movie, like I said. Claws is one of the things. It's like, you have William Jackson Harper, and you just wasted that. Another big one is Bill Murray. His character was like a total waste, too.
Yeah, it's just a glorified cameo. To be honest, I kind of, like, braced myself for that. I was like, yeah, okay.
But it's not even a great cameo. Like, if you've seen Zombieland, Bill Murray has a cameo in Zombieland that is great. It's a tiny part, but it's amazing, you know? It's like one of the best parts of the whole movie. But it's tiny. They have Bill Murray, they have a tiny cameo, but it's not really all that interesting.
Yeah, he just plays, again, another, like, irrelevant character that's not that important to the plot.
Mm-hmm. So I gotta ask you one of the really divisive things. I didn't mind it. I think a lot of people did. I didn't mind it because I kind of got what they were going for, and I kind of appreciated it. I don't think it was necessarily 100% done well, but I kind of appreciate what they were going for. What did you think about MODOK in this movie?
You know what? I saw, looking at him, he looks stupid. And they did the MCU thing where they mocked the character's name and stuff. But, making him like the antagonist from Ant-Man 1 is an interesting twist. Giving him like actual purpose to being there, other than just existing, I guess. And he was actually like a decent part of the movie. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and they didn't necessarily handle it well, but I think the idea that they gave him kind of like a quasi-redemption arc, but they kept it funny the whole time, even when it was tragic, was kind of like interesting, but like it worked sometimes and didn't work other times. Like it was like a kind of a mixed bag. Like every time MODOK showed up, it was like, okay, this might be interesting or this could just fall flat.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was like 50-50. 50% of his scenes worked and 50% of them just fell flat. But I liked the whole bit of him trying to do the redemption arc and then him trying to bond with Scott as he was dying.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny but tragic at the same time, you know? I like when that balance is done right. I think it works well, and I think they did okay. Not great, but okay. Yeah. What did you think of Cassie Lang? I think this is the third time she's been cast.
Yeah.
The third actress to play Cassie Lang.
No, yeah, the actress did great. She was fun. She was obviously the heart of the movie.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the thing that holds it together more than anything, is that this is, at its heart, this is about Scott trying to make up for lost time with his daughter, you know? And the heart of that connection is, like you said, that's like the heart of the movie, is that connection between those two characters, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So I liked that. I think the thing, besides not having Michael Pena, that's like the biggest crime of this movie, is that they made Janet Van Dyne like really annoying. Like she just kept everybody in the dark constantly for like apparently no reason, like just forced drama later. Like, you know, it was all like, oh, there's something crazy happening. Well, what's going on? Well, I'll tell you later. And then she doesn't.
Yeah.
And then something else crazy happens. Oh, something crazy happening. Why is this happening, Mom? I'll tell you later. And it was just like, okay, this is getting kind of annoying now. Yeah, after a while, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Again, like, narratively, like, the whole thing is weak, and the world, like, the quantum realm is just completely wacky and totally, like, improbable, and nothing makes logical sense. Like, why are there all these different life forms? Random life. Again, if you think about it, it's just gonna drive me mad. It's one of those things where you gotta be like, yep, just shut your brain off.
Yeah.
And enjoy this. Honestly, like, I'm not going to outwardly praise Jonathan Majors because, you know, like...
That's tricky territory. Based on real life events?
Yeah, but I mean, I gotta be honest, Kang was the strongest. the strongest element of this movie. Can't be denied.
I mean, Jonathan Majors is a legitimately threatening force to be reckoned with when he's in a movie. He's quick, he's violent, but he's composed in a way that makes it even scarier when he gets violent.
Now he knows where he channels that from.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Unfortunately. But yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. He was a real villain, and I mean, I can understand looking at that and looking at, like, Loki, why Marvel put so much faith into him to make him the subject of the next Avengers movie.
Yeah, he was really good in Loki because he was very different from, I think, what I expected him to be like.
Yes.
When we saw him in Loki, he was kind of charming, he was all over the place, he was kind of manic, and kind of like nerdy almost, like in this, like, interesting way that they portrayed him. And then when they did this movie, they kind of did this very different take, and they made him, like, very composed, very, like, regal, but then, like, just shockingly violent, like, in just quick outbursts.
Yes.
And that made him, like, really threatening and scary. But like you said, based on recent events, it's hard to, like, praise that and look at that as something positive in light of current events.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. There's all sorts of rumors going around about what Marvel's going to do with Kang the Conqueror and that they're going to completely rework their plans and stuff. And it's like, how are they going to do that? It's such a setup for that character throughout this movie, through Loki. They even had a post-credit scene for, like, season 2 of Loki that's, like, further expanding on that, and another post-credit scene entirely focused on Kang outside of that.
Yes, there was the first post-credit scene was about the other Kangs, and then the second post-credit scene was clearly just the scene taken out of an episode of Loki season 2, just dropped at the end of this movie for, I guess to remind people that that's happening.
It's kind of reminiscent of that one clip they did for Civil War with Bucky. I can't remember what movie that was. I think it was on Age of Ultron.
Yeah,
right at the end.
The clip did not look like anything special made for this movie. It literally looked like they just pulled a clip from Loki season 2 and stuck it at the end of this movie.
They've done that a few times. Like, I think at the end of...
By the way, I love the Easter egg in that Loki clip because, like, that Kang variant in that clip, like, he took on the alias Timely. And Timely was, like, the original name for Marvel Comics before it became Marvel Comics. It was Timely Comics. Yeah.
I also thought just the way he was presenting himself or something reminded me a little bit of that Howard Stark scene in the first Captain America movie.
Yeah.
Where he was like, it was just like a similar kind of, like, thing. I think that feels kind of intentional, like they're trying to draw a parallel, that to show it's just a brilliant man, or something. And that's the way they're making the parallel to it. But, yeah, I don't know what they're going to do if they plan on not going forward with the Kang plan for the movies, or if they're going to recast him, or whatever options they have available. There's all sorts of rumors. Nothing has been confirmed about what Marvel's going to do about it.
There's conflicting rumors, which makes it even worse.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have absolutely no insight into what they're doing about this.
I've seen people say, like, I saw somebody and they were posting about, like, I think it was like, look at what they're doing to Jonathan Majors at Marvel, but they haven't done anything to Ezra Miller. And I'm like, well, technically Marvel hasn't done anything publicly about
look what they're
Jonathan
doing to
all.
Majors. Like, what are you talking about? They haven't, like, done or said anything about, like, Jonathan Majors.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they have done something behind the scenes, but we haven't heard anything about that. Like, in reality, it's just rumors. It's none of it's confirmed in any way. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous to think that. It's like, you're kind of looking at rumors and going like, well, that's definitely true. Like, every rumor you see pop up or something, because we have no idea what they're going to do with that. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. I imagine they're at the very least going to basically leave Loki season 2 untouched. And the way that goes is going to be exactly how it was originally going to go. And then if they make a change, it'll probably be later on. And I don't know what they could do. I mean, that if they wanted to really do a big change, they could do the whole, like, bigger threat shows up and instantly stomps the threat you thought was the big threat to take over as the bigger threat. And, like, I guess the way to do that would maybe be that's how you introduce Doom, since you're introducing Fantastic Four before doing the Kang Dynasty Avengers.
Right, yeah.
Is you could maybe make it, like, set up like Kang's gonna be the big bad, and then Doom comes out of nowhere and just crushes that and becomes the actual antagonist or something. Like, that's like a way to handle it, but who knows? It's a tricky situation that Marvel's in. It'll be interesting to see what they do, especially with so many people having Marvel fatigue now and complaining about the MCU and the fact that the path they do have that they've been building towards is now like kind of toxic.
Yeah, exactly.
So anything else to say about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania? Any particular scenes you liked, or any particular things that rubbed you the wrong way?
Nope. It's funny. Like nothing like really rubbed me the wrong way that much in this movie. I'm gonna be honest.
I don't think anything there wasn't anything I really disliked. There was a lot of stuff that I felt was a waste.
Yes.
Like Bill Murray showed up and I was like, oh, here's Bill Murray.
Yeah,
and I was expecting something cool to happen and nothing did.
No, yeah, it was a glorified cameo for Bill Murray. I mean, to be honest, Bill Murray probably also didn't want to have that large of a part in a Marvel movie.
I wasn't expecting a big part, but I was expecting a really kind of cool cameo, and it really was kind of a nothing. Like, they could have literally just cast anybody in that role, and it wouldn't have mattered.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, again, there's stuff like that. Again, like, yeah, the Freedom Fighters also felt, like, irrelevant to, like, the actual plot.
Yeah, that was fun. The holeless guy.
the holeless guy, the jelly guy. He feeds them, like, his jelly, which is him, and then, like, they can, like, understand each other from that point on.
All that stuff was pretty good. William Jackson Harper was good as Quaz, but again, it was kind of not that big of a role. Like, it wasn't, he's kind of wasted.
He responded that because the holeless guy, like, the jelly guy, like, asks guys, so what's it like having holes? And Quaz is like, that's not relevant. Some of us here have holes also. Yeah.
And he's all, the part where he's all like, Veb's like asking how many holes he has or something. Quaz all like, he has 7 holes. And you see like, Scott like kind of counting mentally.
Yeah.
That's funny. I watched a reaction video to catch up instead of watching the whole movie again because I'd already seen it. But to kind of catch up and be fresh with it, I watched a reaction video of somebody watching it. And they did the exact same thing. Like, you could see them like mentally calculating. And I'm like, I'm probably sure I did that in the theater too when I was watching it. Right. They said, how many holes do you have? I was probably like counting it up in my head. Yeah. But yeah. Like, as I think we've said in multiple ways, I don't think it's as bad as some people have made it out to be. I think a lot of the stuff that people really hated, it really didn't mean that much to me. It wasn't that big of a deal. It just felt like there was a lot of stuff that was wasted. Like it could have been a lot better than it was, is what it felt like.
Yeah,
more than anything else.
Yeah, it could be. It's not a particularly strong movie. It's fine. It's serviceable. There's stuff in there that, like, has become film cliches or Marvel cliches that I kind of, like, rolled my eyes at.
What was kind of annoying was the way they kept doing the thing with Scott, like, nodding his head for his helmet to, like, pop on. It was kind of like getting a little cheesy at times. It was like, okay, yeah, I get it. You're having the actor do this gesture for his helmet to, like, pop on. You've done it, like, 10 times now. It's like, you don't have to keep doing this.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like, I think one that struck out to me is, like, at the beginning, when Janet Van Dyne's fighting off those monsters, and the one gets a jump on her, it's like, uh-oh, and then, like, its head is blown off by another person off screen, and it turns out it's Kang, and I'm like, yeah, the last minute save, where, like, the creature or something gets a jump and, like, it gets killed by another party who appears out of nowhere off screen, like, that's been done to death. That is 100% a thing I've seen a million times now. Mm-hmm. It's no longer thrilling.
Also, like, I think they could have done more to create the conflict about Kang and Janet. I think that, they had it so that Janet, like, was, in a romantic relationship with Bill Murray's character. But probably would have been better if it was just with Kang. And it showed how close they were, when they were working together. Yeah.
Well, see, it would have been better if they did things more naturally, where, like, they did have, a relationship. It didn't have to be romantic.
It didn't have to be
platonic. But, like, if they had, like, a relationship and then, like, she gradually found out Kang wasn't who he was, instead of just touching his machine and getting, like, all the information downloaded into her brain at once. That's just crappy writing. I'm sorry. That's just shitty writing. You're rushing through character development just to get to a certain point in the film. Let's be honest.
Just so you can have more, like, special effect shots or,
Yeah, exactly. It's not natural. It doesn't work. It's not satisfying for the audience.
Yeah, it just didn't work that well. I mean, you have 2 great actors that could have had, like, a really interesting scene together, several very interesting scenes together, and they didn't really play that up at the time,
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I feel about it. I was worried that this was going to be a full-on hate fest, our discussion of it. But
the movie would have had to offend me to do that, and it didn't offend me.
It looks like you kind of fell in the same area I did, which is just that, like, you know, it's one of those kind of where you say in an exasperated voice, like, it was fine. You know? Yeah. It kind of like fits into that kind of mold.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, yeah, it's good. It's all right.
I'd say it's probably the worst of the Ant-Man movies, in my opinion.
It's a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I guess.
We'll have to rank this sometime later.
Yeah.
Once Phase 5 finishes, we'll have to see where we feel about it.
Yeah, we'll have to see where the films of Phase 5, like, rank.
Yeah, I can already tell you that I'm about 99.99999% sure that you're going to like the second movie in Phase 5 a lot more than this movie. And I can say I did. So, I think you will as well, based on what I know about you. And I know a lot. No, but that's it for our full spoiler segment. Next week, we don't really have a set plan about what we're going to discuss. I'm sure we're going to end up discussing some more Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and some other topics are going to come up into play that we just haven't yet figured out exactly what we're going to be discussing yet at this point. But we will have something to talk about next week, I'm sure. So until then, you can follow us on Twitter. I am at Tyson Gifford. Will is at FoxelHero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to our podcast through any major podcast client of choice, like Apple Podcast or Pocket Cast. If you do go to our website on thetotalscreen.com and open up one of the container stores for our podcast, you'll see all the relevant links to our SoundCloud page and everything else. It's all there, so check that out. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.